Hello, this is Coach Blades again, and I'm here to talk about early medieval Europe, chapter 11 in your textbook. Historians call this time the Dark Ages because the people of this time did face many challenges. The majority of people were migrants, and that meant that artwork tended to be smaller and portable. Although there was a lot of regional variation in artwork, you can recognize medieval artwork for its animal style. Animal style is a medieval art form in which animals are depicted in very stylized and complicated patterns, often seen fighting with one another or in violent ways. You'll also notice a fear of empty spaces or horror vacui, where interlacing patterns and intricate details fill every single area of the page. Monasteries functioned as the principal centers of learning, and monks were responsible for copying works of art and texts. They were usually the only literate ones in a society. Charlemagne, who was appointed by the Pope to be the leader of the Holy Roman Empire, seeks to bring back the styles and learning that was prominent in ancient Rome, both through architecture and through statuary. And although we don't discuss any Ottonian art in your required works for this chapter, know that they bring back large-scale sculpture and architecture, especially in church design. Here is an overview of the different periods and centuries, along with the geographic regions where these classifications were primarily based. Pause the video here to write down a bunch of the vocabulary that you will need for this chapter, and take some time to define it in the glossary in your textbook. Here are the required works for this chapter. Let's begin with this pair of looped fibulae from the Merovingian period. Let's start with the function. A fibula was a small pin or brooch used to fasten garments, and it also showed the prestige of the wearer. As we'll see with a lot of the artworks, these are small and portable luxury items. They were found in a grave, so they were probably made for a woman who they were found with, but it also could have been worn by men as well. The materials are very fancy, including silver, garnets, and other precious stones. The technique is called cloisonné, which is a very decorative technique uses chasing to engrave and make designs onto the material. The form features zoomorphic elephants. Zoomorphic, like the word zoo, references animals, and this is where we get the term animal style. Very prominent are fish and birds. The fish are in the middle, just above the center, and the loops at the top are eagle's heads with very stylized red eyes. Despite their small size, there is design everywhere, and this is again that horror vacui idea where they don't want to leave any empty negative space. Next, we will look at several pages from the Lindisfarne Gospels, a beautiful illuminated manuscript. This page is called a carpet page because the design takes up the entirety of the page, which is not always the case. Design is modeled after reliquary cross statues. It features a lot of natural growth patterns, spirals, unbroken lines. Again, the horror vacui that we saw in the metalwork is present here in the illuminated manuscript. The monks who made it would have used rulers, compasses, and sharp points of actual silver and lead to make their marks. This style is called insular because it contains a fusion of Celtic, Germanic, and Roman elements. The priory at Lindisfarne was built in 635. In 793, though, it was sacked by Vikings. The monks who managed to escape were sure to grab this book as the most precious object to keep safe. We also know from the colophon or an inscription on the book that it was likely made by Bishop Eadfrith. This is a rare treat to know the artist and author of the book because so often the glory was to God and they were not signed. You can imagine this book being carried in processions during ceremonies and just weekly masses, and you can imagine being a new convert and being dazzled by its display on the altar. Take a moment to look at this close-up of the cross in the middle and the filigree designs all over the page. That's real gold and imported pigments. They only use the finest of materials for this book. Now we will look at another page from the Lindisfarne Gospels illuminated manuscript. There were over 259 pages, and this features one of the Gospels. All 4 were featured in the book. We will look at St. Luke. Each Gospel had a symbol that represented them. Mark was represented by a lion, Matthew by a man, John by an eagle, and Luke, as we see here, is represented by a winged ox. It was a figure of sacrifice, service, and strength. The ox signifies that Christians should be prepared to sacrifice themselves in following Christ. This type of page is called an author portrait because it was a portrait of the author that was about to be featured in the illuminated manuscript. Luke is sitting on a stool in a pose that has some influence from Brooke's books brought to England from Italy. It diverged stylistically, however, with those Italian books and stuck with the familiar traditions of England. It's very linear, flat, without modeling. The drapery folds have patterns. There's no architecture, and the perspective is a little different than what we're used to. We can tell he's divine because of his halo, and his robe resembles that of a philosopher, the scroll symbolizing the important task of writing down his part of the Bible. Next, we will look at Luke's incipit page, or his opening page. This was basically a decorative introduction that always paired with the author portrait page. The large letter Q matches the Latin version of the words Luke would have written down to open his chapter of the book. Now let's take a closer look at some of the beautiful Celtic ornamentation that fills this page of the book. The lines have a natural growth pattern and seem to spiral out from each other. At the bottom, you can see the figure of a cat, kind of bent over in a right angle in the bottom right corner. Above him in that same column in the border are a number of birds, most likely herons. It's easy to see the comparisons and similarities to the metalwork we saw in the looped fibulae. Hor vacui and animal style dominate all of the art forms of this time. Now we will move into the Carolingian period with this small sculpture of a ruler on a horse. It says Charlemagne or Charles the Bald, but let's just go with Charlemagne. Charlemagne was ordained by the Pope to become the next ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, and he made this sculpture likely to imitate some other equestrian statues, such as that of Marcus Aurelius from the Roman Empire, again emulating the good emperors that we saw in the Roman tradition. Though this sculpture is only 9.5 inches tall, the ruler still seems like a person of importance. For one, he is very large in comparison to the horse. He's very upright, undisturbed by the movement of the horse, almost to the point of being unnatural. He does not have a beard, but does have a mustache, which shows he is nobility to the Franks and Gauls of this region. We saw dying Gaul in ancient Rome, and remember he too had facial hair. Our last required work is the Palatine Chapel of Charlemagne, and this is where he actually would have been coronated to become the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. He took his task of reviving the glory of Rome very seriously, and he modeled this chapel after those in Rome and Ravenna, specifically San Vital. Like San Vital, it is centrally planned. It has an octagon shape, an aisle and ambulatory that go around the center, and a clerestory on top. It also features a tribune level, similar to the imperial gallery level at the Hagia Sophia, and this is where Charlemagne had put his throne. As you can see on the ceiling and in the dome, it's covered in golden mosaics, which is an obvious reference to Byzantine traditions. Charlemagne wanted his building to appear strong and robust, not light. He sought clarity in the design. This church also features 2 cylindrical towers with staircases in the front. These features foreshadow westwork that we will see in future churches, and also a lot of details of the Romanesque style.